As we get closer and closer to this year's Cognition & Co. Psychology Masterclass, we wanted to share a little bit of last year's session with you too. This is just a snippet of how helpful one of these sessions can be, so make sure you get your ticket from www.cognitionandco.co.za. So sit back and relax and enjoy this free session on the top 10 things you can do to start prepping for your master's applications now. Get your ticket now and secure yourself a bigger, better, brighter future. Welcome everyone. My name is Dylan Benyon. I'm an intern counseling psychologist and the founder here at Cognition & Co. When I started applying for masters back in 2018, there was no resources such as Cognition & Co. to help facilitate the process of applications, selections, and interviews, right? To be honest, I really didn't know what to expect going into it for the first time, and I didn't really have anyone to call on to help expand my understanding of what applications and interviews look like. I'm sure that at some point a lecturer would have given us that sort of information. Perhaps first year, I know a lot of first year lecturers often like to do that. This is what the statistics are. Of this class, only 5 of you will become psychologists. But I think being in my early 20s, I think I had other things on my mind at the time. So basically, I'm here today to give you a little bit of information about the things I've learned along my journey that I think can help you as you start to apply for masters this year. So these are the top 10 things you can start doing right now. Okay, let's start off with a really, really easy one. Get the ball rolling nicely, right? The first thing you can do to help yourself as you enter the master's application season now is watch the master's preparation session. There we go. Congratulations. Just for watching this video, you've already begun expanding your perspective, and through listening to the rest of us, or all of the speakers talking, you should be able to take a fair amount away from this. So if you're watching this right now, you've already taken critical steps towards your future. So congratulations. I know that's an easy one, and not all of them are going to be that easy, but we thought we'd start off with something quite simple. Okay, number 2, and this is where the real fun starts, right? Number 2 is read. This one is a little bit more time consuming than the previous one. Yes, reading is one of the most important things that you can do before you start applying. Reading gives you the opportunity to learn perspectives from others at your own pace, and usually explained in a relatively understandable manner. But basically, reading gives you more than just the facts and the theories. It also gives you the opportunity to begin to develop a lexicon, basically a language from which to punctuate. You need to be able to learn how to speak the language of psychology when you start to run in these circles. And reading individuals' work will help with that, right? So I'm not going to leave you with just the information of you need to read more. That's just simply not enough. So on the screen, I'm going to post a list of books that have helped me in my journey, both before, during, and now after my master's. So I think if these are things that you can find, copies of them, whether it's at Exclusive Books or you manage to find them online or you download the audiobook of it, these I think are very, very helpful on your journey, right? Please pause this video here, take down these books off the screen and get reading. They certainly helped me. All right, number 3. Read more. So you think you're reading enough? You're probably not, to be honest. Don't forget also to read for pleasure, if I can say it that way. So often we, as psychology students, we do get caught up in reading, journal articles, self-help books, theories, texts, everything that's out there. But don't forget to read for pleasure as well. Yes, there's a great deal of information that can be taken from the books that I listed on the previous slide, but there's also a lot that can be taken away from stories. Things like Harry Potter, The Count of Monte Cristo, Catcher in the Rye, for example, Of Mice and Men, Sense and Sensibility. There's tons of excellent books out there that that will help you gain perspective through the perspective of the characters in the books. If you want to learn about revenge, The Count of Monte Cristo is an excellent example of that. There's a ton of value in reading for pleasure. Not only is it self-care for a lot of individuals, but it's really, really helpful to see those perspectives portrayed in some of the literary greats that are out there. So I would say this section is more for two different reasons, right? Read for pleasure, keeping yourself, in a position whereby you're looking after yourself through your reading. Some students struggle with this. Some students love this. Grab a book that isn't always psychological. Remove yourself from that environment and enjoy just reading. And then I'd say the other part of this in terms of read more is to keep up to date with what's going on. Read newspaper articles, read articles online, and make sure that you know what's happening in the country. I think it's really, really important to stay abreast of some of the political, some of the sociological, some of the issues that we're facing here, because these all become part of what a psychologist needs to interact on once they are, in fact, registered. So keep that in the back of your mind, especially before you go to, say, for example, group interviews. A big topic there is often current events. So keep abreast of what's happening in the world around you by reading. Make sense? Good. Number 4 on my list of things that you can do now before master's applications is obviously autobiographies. Now, I really, really, really don't have to say much about this because Shelley Huser will be discussing this in a lot more depth in just a little bit of time on this video. So I will just give my thoughts on it, but Shelley will be giving a lot more. I'm not an expert, right, on autobiographies, but Shelley is much closer to what that would look like. But what I will say on top of this, and something you can start to jot down now, is that start thinking about what you want to put into your autobiography, and start jotting that down, right? How? I think the best way to do this is through journaling, right? Start being reflective in this manner through journaling, and you'll be surprised at what comes out. Just kind of let your mind wander at times. Sit with the blank piece of paper, tabula rasa, right? Start with a blank piece of paper and just let your mind wander. And as it does, just jot down what comes to mind. As you start to think about your personal history, some of the stories that you want to tell in this, you'll be more aware of what to put into your final autobiography if you've been more exhaustive in terms of your thinking and your reflexive ability. Remember, the universities are looking for that specifically. Do you have the ability to be reflective? Can you be reflexive in the moment even? That obviously happens a little bit more at selections and interviews. But being reflective, I think, is an important part. And that's what the autobiography is all about. Can you be reflective and can you process some of the things that's happened in your past, in your journey, in what shaped you to who you are now? And can you consider them from a psychological angle? So that's some of the things that you want to do there. I think you'll be surprised as you start to journal and as you start to jot ideas down, how these ideas will evolve, and let it evolve. Let it turn into something that leaves an impact, regardless of what the actual content is. So that's all I have to say on this. I don't necessarily believe that I'm an expert in this manner, but I do think that journaling is an excellent way to get started and something you can do now. You don't need a complete product immediately, right? You don't need to write your autobiography in a 1-hour setting and that's it. It needs to be something that takes time. It needs to be something that evolves between now and when you have to submit it. Don't do your first version and say, that's it, I'm done with this now. I've completed it. That's a perfect recollection of my history and my past. Give it some time, sit with it, unpack it, open different boxes and avenues and go down them. Be tangential here. You don't have to completely circle around the same topic all the time. Allow yourself to go off onto these different tangents and see what comes of it. I know that from my first autobiography that I wrote to the one that I used that was eventually basically helped me get selected, they were completely different. And yes, that took 4 or 5 years to kind of curate, but they were very, very different. The themes, the ideas, the processing, the reflexivity that went into my autobiographies changed over the years. And I won't necessarily share that here, the content of it, but what I can say is that looking at the two next to each other was quite a shock. So allow yourself to experience that. Jot down everything that you think needs to go into your autobiography. Sit with it for a week or two afterwards. Add notes, break it down sentence by sentence, find what works and find what doesn't. I think you'll be surprised as you do so. So give it a go. I know journaling is CBT homework, but it's something that, it can be really, really helpful if you dedicate time to it. So we'll see what Shelley has to say as well. But from my side, I think journaling is an excellent way to begin this process. And I wish you all the luck in the world as you delve into it. All right, number 5, research your category and others. It's so important that you need to have a good understanding of what each category looks like. I know that I won't have to speak that much on this because Zara will be speaking about finding your own niche and why your journey matters and all those aspects. But I just wanted to highlight here again why it is so important that you need to be able to speak the language that is used when we're talking about the various categories within psychology. Whether it's clinical, counseling, educational, industrial, research, neuro, you need to be able to punctuate from an understanding of each of these. What I see so often is that students are applying for registrations that don't necessarily fit with them, right? They apply for clinical, they apply for educational, they apply for counseling, but they themselves, the student themselves, might have an affinity for a different category. Now, it's important here to understand that when you go to selections, right, you're sitting in front of a bunch of psychologists that are very, very well versed in what these categories look like for themselves and for the individuals that they're training. They will look at somebody that's perhaps applying for, let's say, clinical, for example, and they see that person as more of a counseling psychologist. Now, if the student themselves hasn't come to realize that yet, it's not the job of the psychologist on the panel to tell them that and say, perhaps you should apply for educational because you seem better suited for it. They're just not going to select you. So it's fundamentally important that you have a good understanding of what the different categories are, what the identity of those categories are, and be able to speak to your strengths, your characteristics, your niche, creative, innovative ideas that speak to that category specifically. You need to be able to describe, contrast, and compare the categories. And the reason why that's so important is that you will be asked questions around why clinical, for example, if you're applying for clinical. And most of the students are able to answer for their category that they've applied for. But the question that often stumps them is the one that counters that. Why not educational psychology? Why not counseling psychology? Why not neuro? And in that situation, the students usually haven't done the appropriate research into the categories they're not applying for, and therefore become stumped by that question. They then throw it back onto, no, but I'm better suited for this one. I'm this one. I'm this one. I'm this one. So make sure that you do have the ability to answer that question appropriately. This is something, especially with a lot of students looking for alternative options in terms of, plan Bs, the B-Psych equivalents, PGCEs, those sort of things. When a panelist sees a PGCE, they're going to think, why not educational psychology? When they see, somebody became a registered counselor, they're going to say, why not counseling psychology? When you became a psychometrist, for example, what about industrial doesn't meet your needs? So you need to have an understanding of these various things. What I would recommend all students to do, and I'll put this on the screen now, is to read again, right? So reading, there's 3 of these. But you need to download certain documents that I think will give you a better understanding. As you should know, as an honors grad, that we don't have scopes for clinical counseling. We don't follow scopes at present, right? We have what we call the scope of the profession. This is a document that outlines the rules and regulations for what psychologists as a profession do. So it's important that you understand that. The way that we determine what psychologists can do now is through a document called the Minimum Standards of Training. So go download that document as well. That gives you a detailed understanding of what each category does in terms of their training, and that speaks to their competency that they hold within the field of psychology and what they can and can't do. So that gives you a deeper understanding of these various categories. So please go do that. What I'll also include on the screen now is a couple of journal articles that you can go read that speak to the history and the development of the various identities within the various fields of psychology. So I'll put that on there. This, I think, is a great place to start, right? Don't see this as an exhaustive list, and once you've read these couple journal articles that you're done with research for it. For example, with the Crossroads article by Prof. Young, and the Professional Boundaries article by Prof. Young. Go look at the references. Go see what articles are referenced in this article, and go read those as well. Expand your understanding, because it's going to be valuable when you are asked these questions at a selection panel, or by a selection panel, I should say. All right. Number six, this is more practical, right? Go and get your documents certified. Now, a lot of students will submit documentation and it won't necessarily have been certified correctly. When students see stamps on their degree certificate or on their academic record, they believe that that's what the certification is. Unfortunately, that's not. Please, guys, make sure that you go and get your documents certified appropriately. What this means is that you take let's say your degree certificate and your academic record, for example. The university asks for certified copies of both. You make a copy of both. You take your original and the copy off to a police station, and you ask the Commissioner of Oaths to certify the documents for you. Basically, this is just a legal understanding that what is in the copy, because obviously you're not going to send the university your originals, right? But you want to clarify that what is in the copy is an exact replica of what is in the original, so that if there is any funny business with changing marks or something on that you're then legally responsible for that, right? Your certifications will last 6 months, so you can actually do that sooner than later. By the time 6 months is up, now it's going to be September, 90% of the universities are going to be closed, right, in terms of their application processes. So go now. It's the beginning of April. It's the beginning of April. It's not right now while I'm recording this, but it is when you see this. Go make all the copies that you can. Go make a couple of copies, because if you have to submit these things in person, or hard copies of these things, make sure that you've got enough copies so that you don't have to keep going back to the police station. But go and get your documents certified. Keep all the copies in a little file somewhere, and when the universities ask for them, you submit those originally stamped certifications, right? Make sure that the police station are doing it. You can also do it at places like Postnet as well, but only certain Postnets will do it. They need to have a Commissioner of Oaths stamp. There needs to basically be a notary. Whether it's a notary, that's the law side of things, but not necessarily. Commissioner of Oaths is enough for a certification. And like I said, they last 6 months from the date of signing. One other thing I will say as well about this is, if you're going to the police station anyway, you can also get your criminal record check at the same time. This only applies at UNISA. UNISA requires on their online application that you submit some form of criminal record check. And this takes quite a while to do. 3 to 4 months is what I've experienced. So what they actually make accommodation for is that when you apply, you can submit the receipt that you get from when you go and apply for your police clearance certificate. This can also be done at certain police stations, so please do your research beforehand. Make sure that you've gone to the right one where they can do this. They do your fingerprints and everything. They send off the documents, and then you receive a certificate back to say whether you have or haven't got any criminal record or anything like that. So make sure that you get that done as well. It's only UNISA that's going to ask for that document, but it is, if you're going to the police station anyway, rather get that done now so that you have that. And like I said, if by the time applications are needing to be submitted and you're filling out your niece's online form, if you don't have that actual criminal record check back yet, you can submit just the receipt, and the university will then ask you when you're invited to selections to please provide that actual document. When I did this in 2019, it was 114 Rand to do this. That number might have changed. So please also make sure that you're doing your research beforehand in terms of what the cost and the amounts you need to take with you on the day. Okay. Number 7, networking and referee reports. All right. Now, this is something I spoke about at last year's Masters Prep session. So if you watch last year's, you'll know my perspective on this. But I do believe that, it's such an important aspect of applications that it does require an additional mention. So students, you need to be active in the way that you network within the field. It is so important that you put yourself out there, because that's what's going to make you stand out. You don't necessarily have to have your name known by every psychologist out there. I think that's quite a difficult thing to do. But when it comes time to finding a referee, it's important that you have somebody that can speak to your ability to be trained as a psychologist. Now, it can be difficult to find places to do this, right? But I have listed some examples here. For example, you're at Master's Preparation Session, Health Cognition & Co. Now, typically when we've done this in the past, we did it live. We did it with, we've done it in person before. And that gave students the opportunity to network within the field with the psychologists and with other students. Make sure that you're still doing that. We have a Telegram group that is offered to anybody that's applying for Masters. So if you're not a part of that, just go to our website, go to the search bar, type in Cognition & Co. Telegram group, and you'll be able to join that immediately. And that way you can basically be part of the peer support network that is Cognition & Co. You're not alone as you go through this, and other students can be very, very helpful in your journey. And that's one of the things that you can learn, right? That's networking in itself with other students. It doesn't always have to be with a psychologist or a lecturer or a professor or a psychiatrist, right? So make sure that you're at least doing a peer support version of networking. There are other events that you can attend as well that are in person. For example, the CISA conference every year. Now, the CISA conference can be quite expensive for students to join, but what you can do is you can become a member of the CISA student division, and you can then volunteer through that at the conference. They allow you to watch some of the talks being done, but you also get an excellent opportunity to network within the field. You get to speak, and you get to speak to a bunch of professionals that are coming past, that need help, that need to find areas, and you can really, really network very, very well at that event. I went and spoke last year at that event, and I was blown away by the opportunities that are available there if you're lucky enough to be selected to be a volunteer in that. So please check that out. CISA is the Psychological Society of South Africa, and every year they run a conference. And it's in person too, which is excellent. Anyway, there are other events that you can attend as well. One of my examples here are CPD training events. Now, as a psychologist, we need to get continuous development points, right? These are things that we need to be continuously developing. We need to get points to basically see that we're doing so on a practical and ethical level, right? Now, for a student, it's not necessary for you to collect these points, but it is really, really amazing if you're able to attend CPD training and not necessarily get the points, but get the information from the training, right? It's training. You also get the opportunity to then network with the facilitators, with the speakers, with those sort of things. So I highly recommend that as an option. Yes, some of these things can be free, which is excellent. Some of them cost a bit of money, but the training itself is excellent. It's going to give you a different perspective, and it's going to give you the opportunity, like I said, to learn to punctuate from these various modalities. While I was in honors, I did some training through an organization where I did interactional pattern analysis and person-centered interviewing, and I found that these things really helped me in my master's and in my internship in terms of like understanding a systematic approach to therapy. So consider looking out for these sort of events and jumping in where you have the space and capacity. Now, why it's so important to network is, I think, for a lot of students, it's that ability to find somebody to be a reference for you. Now, you need to actively nurture these relationships, and I'll speak about this a little bit later when I speak about planning and things like that. But it's important that you are able to find somebody to write your referee reports for you. Now, there's a bit of a hierarchy that I wouldn't say is formalized, but it's the way that I see it. And I'll share that with you now. I think a lot of the universities find academic references at the top of the list. These are psychology lecturers, professors, somebody that would have, been in touch with you academically, that can speak to your training academically as a psychologist. These are often very difficult for UNISA students to attain because they've studied via distance. So UNISA won't provide academic references for individuals. Hence why I say it's so important that you guys get out there and actively network. Yeah, so if you're unable to get an academic reference, then perhaps a professional reference. This could be a psychologist that you interact with on a mentorship capacity. You're the mentee and they're the mentor. This person will hopefully know you for a certain amount of time and be able to speak to your trainability as a psychologist from a psychological perspective. So that's also really, really helpful. I think underneath that would be a therapeutic reference. So this would be somebody that you're seeing in individual therapy, that sees you on a regular basis, that you're working through your problems with, you're working through some of your issues, and you're working on your strengths as well, right? And these individuals can also speak to your capacity to be a psychologist. Now, with this one, it becomes a little bit difficult because some psychologists won't write. They feel that is not therapeutic in nature, and it forms a bit of a different relationship. So some psychologists will, some psychologists won't. Make sure that if you're going to a psychologist for a referee report specifically, which I don't think you should necessarily, but if you are doing that, then make sure that that's a conversation that you have early with your psychologist. You don't want to spend, 2-3 months in therapy, and then they're like, no, this is not something that I was ever considering doing. So make sure that you have that conversation. This is about, speaking the language, setting up setting up a space where you can have these conversations with your references, and doing so appropriately. Next up, I think would be, and I think this is kind of on like a par level here, supervisors within a volunteer organization, so an NGO and NPO. These are individuals that are usually social workers, psychologists, have worked within the field of mental health for some time, and usually are running or managing these NGOs or NPOs, and they can also speak to your capacity from a volunteer perspective. So this is why volunteering is so important, getting yourself out there, making sure that you're seeing what South Africa has to offer in terms of mental health care, and playing a part in terms of facilitating that where possible. So these supervisors can be very, very helpful as well. On the same level there, I think occupational references. Now, a lot of students, especially if you study through UNISA, it's probably because you needed to do it distance or part-time, and you had a job full-time perhaps, or part-time. So this now, your line managers, they can speak also to your training. They might not have the psychological understanding of what it is that you're trying to achieve in your applications or through your further studies. But I think that's a space where you can sit down with them, really give them an understanding of what it is that you're applying for, and what it is that they can consider when putting into your referee report. Yes, the referee reports are quite prescriptive from the university. There are specific questions, but if your line manager didn't study psychology, they may need you to just chat a little bit about what it is you're trying to achieve in this. Yes, you're not trying to prime them to write excellent things. As much as a reference report is, about strengths, it's also about weaknesses, because if you're not aware of your own weaknesses and that goes in there, that comes out at selections, you need these are aspects that need to be considered as well. So it's a combination of the good with the bad. So allow your managers and any referee basically to be open to exploring all of those aspects. It's very, very important. And then as we start to get to the end of this list, I think that there's a space for a sort of pastoral referee. A lot of students are quite religious or actively practicing their faith. Individuals in good standing within these organizations can definitely write for you as well. it's very important that if you have somebody that's known you for a while in a religious organization, then it's something that you can definitely approach. But again, you may also need to have that conversation. And then finally, in terms of these references, I would say are the personal referees. Now, the problem with having a mom or a sister or a friend or, and somebody closely related to you write a referee report is that inherently they are biased. They're more likely to focus on your strengths and your weaknesses. And like I said, these things are about both the strengths and the weaknesses. So it can be a little bit problematic, but what I'm saying here is that if you really are stuck, this can be an option for you as well. Perhaps just sit your referee down and say, please, perhaps, put that into your autobiography. This person asked me because they don't have an academic reference, or, and that person, your spouse or your friend or your family member is trying to be as objective as possible in terms of your ability to be trained as a psychologist. So what I would say here as well is that you need to be organized in terms of looking at these things, right? In terms of getting these things done. You might need to have a meeting with your reference, your referee beforehand, and take them a copy of your your CV, unless you have burnt a CD. Take them a copy of your CV. Take them a copy of your academic records and have a discussion about these things. This can be an amazing networking opportunity as well. So make sure that you're doing that, and then keep up to date with them. If they need information, make sure that you are available. So this is all very, very important stuff. All right. I'll chat more about just managing references in just a little bit. All right. Okay. So number 8 is, I'm calling this Excel and planning. It's more so planning though, but when you're applying for masters, we all understand and appreciate the statistics, right? It's so important, therefore, that you're applying to a number of universities. But what happens is when you do this is that there's different dates, there's different procedures, there's different deadlines. These are all really, really important. And you cannot miss a deadline here. It's of the utmost importance that you take responsibility here for these deadlines, not just for yourself, but also for your referees. I would recommend setting up some sort of Excel spreadsheet that has the various, universities on the different tabs at the bottom. I would suggest that what you do is fill in all the dates that you get from the Cognition & Co website, double check them with the university's websites, and just make sure that you're staying on top of that. The last thing that you need is to miss a deadline, because you will not be considered 1 second over the deadline time. Remember, at the same time, that some of these universities, their deadlines are at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, some are at midnight that evening. So make sure that you're aware of these things so that you have the opportunity to not miss any of these things. I would even consider setting up something like a Google Calendar alert for each of the deadlines. And then a week prior to that, even setting up a thing to remind yourself, hey, this one is due in a week's time. At the same time, you can use that as a reminder to then contact your references as well to say, listen, I'm not sure if you've submitted yet, but if you haven't, there's a week to go. It's due at this time. This is who you email. This is how the document must be saved. Make sure that you're being transparent in the way that you come across with this stuff. Cognition & Co makes it, I think, relatively simple in terms of finding the dates and stuff, but it's still your responsibility to make sure that the dates are all correct and that you're sending these things off at the right time. Okay, we're coming to the end of our list. Number 9. Number 9 for me is self-care. Self-care is always important, and as a psychology student, you should already know this. Master's applications, and in particular the interview processes, are extremely stressful and extremely draining. I remember in the past coming home during midway through selections and just being so burnt out that I didn't know which way was up. And then you've got homework to do. You've got a presentation to create. You've got a report to write. You've got research to do. You've got something that's happening from the university and you are drained. So what I want to say here is make sure that you understand what gives you that time away so that you can recharge. The reason I mention this as something to do now is that if you don't know what recharges you now, it's time to get in touch with what that is. It's time to also make that part of your routine now so that when things do start getting tough, you know exactly how to respond. For me, everybody, I love running. Running for me provides a space to get away from things, to push myself and to think. It puts me in a space where my body's stressed out from the running, and it makes my brain think in a different way. When you're stressed and the norepinephrine is flowing through your body, it makes you think in a different way. And I love that. It gives me, yeah, physically I'm tired, but cognitively, I feel like it gives me an edge. So over the years, I've come to understand that if I'm not running, I'm not necessarily looking after myself. And I can feel that if I'm not out there running, I don't think as clearly as what I usually do. I don't have that space to recharge and go back into the next day. I don't go back into the next day revitalized and re-energized to really attack it head on. So, for me, I really appreciate running as a way to look after myself and to practice self-care. But for a lot of you guys, running may not be your cup of tea, but maybe a cup of tea is. Self-care is as simple as that. It can just be a cup of tea. It comes in many ways, shapes, and forms. Maybe exercise, such as running, cycling, hiking, walking. Maybe it's time with friends and family. Maybe it's going out for dinner or for a date. It can also just be reading a book, like I've said. Maybe it's watching a movie or a series or getting a massage. Maybe just having a bath. Find what's right for you and start implementing it now, so that when you do have to go through the stress of applications or selections, that you know where to turn to the minute that you're not feeling like yourself. Okay, and then finally, number 10, therapy. The Cognition & Co team receives a number of emails on a daily basis. And one of the most common questions that we get asked is, what can I do to improve my chances of getting into a master's program? Now, fundamentally, this question is extremely difficult to answer. There are so many external variables that come into play. Variables such as the university that you're applying to, the staff that work at that university, the modality of that university, the panelists from the internship sites that sit on the panels that facilitate those selections, and et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. It goes, the list is extremely long. Now, while we cannot control these external factors, what you can do is best limit those that are internal. And that speaks to you, right? Take responsibility, take control for the stake that you have in this process, in making sure that you've done everything that you can do to broaden your perspective, to identify potential weak spots, to highlight your strengths, to look out for any blind spots, and to get yourself emotionally ready for the undertaking that is masters. Get yourself into a therapeutic space to facilitate your own growth and development. And show the panel that you've been a client, you've sat in that uncomfortable space, sometimes embarrassing space, and you've opened up and you know what it feels like to sit on that side of the proverbial couch. And in doing so, you're telling them that you have buy-in in the field and that you're ready to be trained as a psychologist. It's so important to be in personal therapy because you know as well that this question is going to come up at selections. They're going to ask you, have you been in therapy before? And I think it's quite telling when an individual says, no, they haven't. So please, please, please consider that as an option. If you have the means, if you have the capability, find yourself an HPCSA registered psychologist, reach out to them and find a way to experience what it feels like to be in therapy. You will find, even if you're going into it and you think, I've got nothing wrong, I've got no problems, I've got nothing to deal with, it becomes such an incredible environment because you can focus on the strengths, on the resources that you have, on creativity, on innovation. You can focus on things that really speak to the identity of being a psychologist. And I think here you may be surprised as you do go back and as you do look at various aspects of your life, especially if you're still trying to write your autobiography. There's a lot that can come out in terms of being reflective in that space. And I really encourage anybody, if you haven't been, or if you haven't been in a while and you are about to go through this process, prepare yourself mentally, emotionally, and practically for what it feels like. Okay, that's my top 10 things that you can do now to better prepare yourself for master's applications. But I won't leave you hanging because I know that I said reading 2 or 3 times. So I'll give you one bonus one, right? Consider attending Cognition & Co's other workshops and events, right? The group interview preparation sessions, for example, and the case study and role plays. Now, these I think are a space whereby the networking opportunities are valuable because, again, the peer support aspect, the networking with psychologists that facilitate these sessions, I think is very important, and the practicality. Now, in this space where we are now doing this online and you just watching, you're basically an observer. You don't have to apply anything of what's being said by any one of these speakers today. But I think it is really, really important that you consider engaging on these other platforms, so that you can put yourself in a position whereby you practically have to be a participant and not just an observer. So, for example, the group interview preparation sessions, we put together a group of students at random for each event, and we pair them with a psychologist, and we give you guys questions basically to discuss. We do this a couple of times, but the most beneficial aspect here is that the psychologist that facilitates is able to give personal and group feedback in terms of the group dynamics and highlighting strengths, weaknesses, and things to consider going forward. I think these sessions are really, really great. And what makes them fantastic as well is that we always have different questions, different facilitators, and there will always be a different group of randomized students. So you can do these things over and over again, and each time take away something different. The next event that I think is something really, really, really important to consider is the case study and role plays. These are exceptionally practical, and they're one-on-one. You sit with a psychologist and you go through a case study, which you have 24 hours to prep a presentation for, and you really unpack it basically line by line, and you understand a little bit more about conceptualization and formulation. And then you also get an opportunity to practice a couple of role plays. So these, I think, are excellent learning opportunities that really take psychology from a theoretical understanding and academic understanding and put it into the real world context. That's it for me today. I hope that you have enjoyed my suggestions and that you found them helpful. I know that some of the other speakers, both before and after me, will expand on some of these aspects, but I really just wanted to highlight what I found helpful in my own process. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the event, and thank you for your time, and thank you for your support. Goodbye. If you enjoyed this and want to learn more about studying psychology in South Africa, get your ticket now at www.cognitionandco.co.za. And while you're at it, hit the like and subscribe button for more content, as well as following us on social media.